Welcome to Calm Buddha. Tonight you'll discover a timeless wisdom that has guided seekers for centuries, the secret to finding peace even when your mind won't stop racing. The ancient teachings of Zen and the profound parables of the Buddha have a way of gently silencing the clamor of our thoughts, allowing us to drift into a state of deep, meaningful rest. These stories aren't just fables. They are keys that unlock our mind's natural ability to let go of stress and worry. They work even if you've never meditated before, even if you've tried everything else. As we journey through these tales of quiet rivers and empty cups, you'll notice something amazing happening. The tension in your body will begin to dissolve, your thoughts will start to slow, and you'll find yourself sinking into a state of profound relaxation. Make yourself comfortable, adjust your pillow, and let your body become heavy against the bed. Take one deep breath with me now. And as you exhale, know that you've just taken the first step on a journey that has been waiting for you. Let's begin with our first story, which takes place by a peaceful river where a lesson about the nature of our reactions awaits us. This is the story of the empty boat. There once was a man who loved to row his boat on a peaceful river. He found great joy in drifting along the water, enjoying the calm and solitude of nature. Every evening, as the sun was setting and the world was bathed in golden light, he would take his boat out for a quiet journey. He would listen to the soft sounds of the water lapping against the hull and watch the fireflies begin their silent, shimmering dance. On one such evening, as he paddled softly, relishing the tranquility, he noticed another boat heading directly toward him. At first, he called out politely, "Be careful." But the boat didn't change course. It continued on its collision path. The man's peaceful evening was suddenly filled with frustration. He began shouting, "Move aside. You're going to crash into me." His anxiety mounted as he watched the approaching boat. He was ready to unleash his anger on the careless boater. Finally, as the two vessels collided with a soft thud, he looked closely, ready to confront the reckless person inside. But when he looked, he realized the boat was empty. There was no one inside. It was simply drifting, carried by the current. In that very moment, the man's anger dissolved instantly. He sat there feeling foolish for yelling at an empty boat. What had changed? Not the situation, the boats had still collided. What changed was his understanding. There was no intention behind the collision, no carelessness or disrespect to fuel his rage. This story reveals a simple but profound truth. Our anger, frustration, and resentment often arise not from events themselves, but from the stories we create about the intentions behind those events. We see a driver cut us off in traffic, and our minds immediately construct a story of disrespect, a personal affront. We see a text message with a harsh tone, and we assume the sender intended to cause us pain. Yet how often are these boats empty? The driver may be rushing to a hospital. The person who sent the harsh message may be preoccupied with a family crisis. The friend who hasn't replied to your text might be struggling with a private sadness. Our minds, driven by ego, quickly fill these empty vessels with assumptions of malice or disrespect. In Zen practice, we cultivate awareness of this pattern through mindfulness. By observing our thoughts without immediately identifying with them, we can catch ourselves in the act of filling an empty boat. The next time you feel a rush of anger, notice the physical sensations, the tightening in your chest, the quickening of your breath, the narrowing of your vision. Use these as a reminder to pause and ask yourself, is this boat empty? As the Buddha once said, you will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. Our anger and frustration, like a hot coal we pick up to throw at someone else, burns us first and most. By recognizing the empty boats in our daily life, we liberate ourselves from this self-inflicted suffering. We find peace not by changing the world, but by changing our mind. Now let's journey to a mountain path where a monk faces an unexpected challenge. This is the story of the monk and the tiger. Once upon a time, in a quiet monastery nestled deep in the forest, there lived a wise and peaceful monk. Every day, he would take long walks through the surrounding woods, meditating on the beauty of nature and the teachings of the Buddha. He found great peace in the solitude of the forest, where he could connect deeply with the present moment and the world around him. One day, during his walk along a narrow mountain path, the monk suddenly heard a loud, frightening sound, a tiger's roar echoing through the trees. He froze for a moment, his heart pounding in his chest. When he turned, he saw a large, fierce tiger charging toward him through the thick forest underbrush. Eyes were locked on him, and its powerful body moved with terrifying speed. The monk's first instinct was to run, and he did. He sprinted down the path, his robes billowing behind him as the tiger drew closer and closer. Desperate to escape, he saw a vine hanging down the side of a steep cliff. Without hesitation, he grabbed the vine and began to climb down, hoping to find safety below. As he descended, clinging tightly to the vine, he looked down and his heart sank. Below him, another tiger was pacing at the bottom of the cliff, waiting for him to fall. He was trapped. There was no way up and no way down. The monk paused, dangling from the vine with one tiger above and another below. His situation seemed hopeless. But as he hung there, suspended between the two tigers, something small caught his eye. Growing out of the cliffside just within reach was a wild strawberry plant. On the plant was a single ripe red strawberry. In that moment, the monk stopped thinking about the tigers, his fear, and his predicament. Instead, he reached out with one hand, carefully plucked the strawberry, and put it into his mouth. He bit into the fruit, savoring its sweetness. The taste was exquisite, sweet, fresh, and perfect. For that brief moment, all that existed was the joy of the strawberry's flavor. Despite the danger surrounding him, the monk found peace in that single mindful moment. He had accepted that he couldn't change his circumstances, but he could still fully experience the present. The monk smiled, knowing that this fleeting taste of sweetness was a reminder of life's beauty, even in the most precarious of situations. This teaching lies at the heart of the monk and the tiger story. It reveals a profound truth about our human condition. We spend our lives suspended between two tigers, the regrets and wounds of our past, and the fears and anxieties about our future. Our thinking mind convinces us that happiness lies in resolving past hurts or securing future comforts, when in reality, peace is available only in the present. Look deeply at your own experience. How much of your mental suffering comes from replaying past events you cannot change? The harsh words you wish you hadn't spoken, the opportunity you missed, the relationship that ended painfully. These are the tigers above, and how much anxiety stems from anticipating future scenarios that may never materialize. The work presentation next week, the medical test results, the financial worries. These are the tigers below. The strawberry in the story represents the simple, available joy that exists alongside our difficulties. It doesn't deny the reality of our challenges, it simply offers us a different relationship to them. The strawberry might be the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of a child's laughter, the taste of a simple meal, the comfort of your bed, or even the miracle of your own breath. These small pleasures are always available, even in our most difficult moments, but we miss them when we are consumed by the tigers of past and future. As the Buddha taught, do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. The satisfaction we seek is not in achieving results, but in the quality of presence we bring to each moment. By savoring the strawberries along our journey, we discover that peace is not waiting for us when the tigers disappear. It's available in their very presence. Our next story reveals a profound truth about the nature of suffering through a simple yet powerful metaphor. This is the story of the two arrows. One day, the Buddha was sitting with his disciples in a peaceful forest clearing. The trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of birds filled the air. The Buddha often taught his disciples about the nature of suffering and the path to enlightenment. On this particular day, a troubled disciple approached him with a question. "Master," the disciple said, "I do not understand why we suffer so much in this life. Pain seems to follow us wherever we go. Why is this so? And how can we find peace amidst so much suffering?" The Buddha gazed at the disciple with kindness and understanding. He saw the confusion in his student's eyes. "Let me explain," the Buddha said gently. "Imagine that a person is struck by an arrow. This arrow causes pain, and the pain is inevitable. This is the first arrow." The disciple nodded, understanding that the first arrow symbolized the inevitable difficulties of life, the physical pain of illness, injury, or loss. But now, the Buddha continued, imagine that after being struck by the first arrow, the person is then struck by a second arrow. This second arrow does not come from outside. It is created by the mind. It is the anger, fear, frustration, or sorrow that follows the pain. This is the second arrow. The Buddha paused, letting his words sink in. "You see," he said, "while the first arrow is unavoidable, the second arrow is optional. The first arrow represents the natural pain we all experience in life, the challenges and hardships we cannot escape. But the second arrow, the suffering caused by how we react to that pain, is something we can choose to avoid." The disciple listened intently as the Buddha explained that when we experience physical or emotional pain, the first arrow, we often make it worse by adding a second layer of suffering with our mental reactions. We become angry, resentful, or anxious, and these emotions deepen the wound. Instead of accepting the pain, we resist it, and in doing so, we increase our suffering. Think of it like this: the first arrow is the pain of a bad grade on an exam, the sting of a careless remark from a friend, or a minor car accident. These things happen. But the second arrow is our mind's reaction. It's the voice that says, "I'm a failure, I'll never succeed." It's the endless replay of the rude comment, each thought piercing us again and again. It's the frustration we feel even after the initial shock of the accident has passed. Zen Buddhism points to our deeply ingrained habit of aversion, our mind's automatic recoiling from unpleasant experiences. When pain arises, we instinctively resist it, creating a layer of mental tension that compounds the original discomfort. This is how we shoot the second arrow at ourselves. We don't deny pain or pretend it doesn't hurt. Instead, we bring curious, compassionate attention to the experience itself without adding the second arrows of judgment, resistance, or elaborate storytelling. What you think you become, the Buddha once said. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you create. Each time we respond to pain with aversion, we create suffering. But each time we meet pain with mindful awareness and acceptance, we create an opportunity for healing and growth. By recognizing the second arrow for what it is, an optional choice, we begin to find true peace. We can't always control the first arrows that fly our way, but we have tremendous power over how much we suffer from them. We learn that freedom from suffering isn't found in escaping our human experience, but in meeting it with wisdom and compassion. Now let us explore a story that teaches us about the universal nature of loss and how understanding it can bring peace. This is the parable of the mustard seed. Once, long ago, there lived a young woman named Kisa Kutami. She was kind, compassionate, and devoted to her family, but her life took a tragic turn when her only child, a beloved son, fell ill and passed away. Overcome with grief, Kisa could not accept her son's death. She carried his lifeless body in her arms, wandering from house to house, desperately seeking someone who could bring him back to life. At each door, Kisa begged, "Please, help me. My son is dead. Is there anyone who can cure him?" But everyone she approached turned her away, saying that there was nothing they could do. Her sorrow grew heavier with each step, and her heart ached more with every rejection. She wept openly, her grief a raw wound for all to see. One day, Kisa's path led her to a wise elder who took pity on her and said, "Go to the Buddha. Perhaps he can help you." With a flicker of hope in her heart, Kisa Gotami hurried to the Buddha, who was known for his compassion and wisdom. She found him sitting calmly under a Bodhi tree, surrounded by his disciples. Falling to her knees, she placed her son's body before him and pleaded, "Master, please bring my child back to life. I cannot bear this pain." The Buddha looked at her with great compassion and understanding. He could see Kisa was deeply suffering, but he also knew that she needed to learn a profound truth about life and death. He thought for a moment and then spoke softly. "I can help you, Kisa, but first you must bring me something. Go into the village and bring me a mustard seed." Kisa's heart leapt with hope. "Yes, master, I will bring you a mustard seed," she said, her voice trembling with relief. But before she could leave, the Buddha added, "The mustard seed must come from a household that has never experienced death. If you can find such a household, bring the seed to me, and I will bring your child back to life." Kisa nodded eagerly and set off on her mission. She went to the first house in the village and knocked on the door. A kind woman answered, and Kisa explained her request. "Please, can you give me a mustard seed, but it must come from a home where no one has ever died." The woman looked at Kisa with sad eyes and said, "I am sorry, but my husband passed away last year." Kisa thanked her and moved on to the next house. Again, she made her request, but this time the response was, "I am sorry, but my mother passed away many years ago." House after house, Kisa Gotami knocked on doors, hoping to find one that had never known death. But at every house she heard stories of loved ones lost. A mother, a father, a brother, a sister, a child. As the day wore on, Kisa began to realize that death was not unique to her. It was a universal experience, one that touched every family. Finally, as the sun began to set, Kisa returned to the Buddha empty-handed, but with a new understanding. She knelt before him, her heart no longer filled with desperate hope, but with a quiet acceptance. "Master Inger," she said, "I could not find a single house that has never known death. Every family has experienced the loss of someone dear to them. Now I understand that death is a part of life and no one can escape it. The Buddha nodded gently and replied, Kisa, you have learned an important truth. Death is inevitable and suffering comes to all who are attached to the things of this world. But by accepting the impermanence of life, you can find peace. Your grief was not unique. It is shared by all beings. This is the nature of existence. With these words, Kisa Gotami realized that her suffering, though intense, was not hers alone to bear. She had been blinded by her personal grief, but now she saw that all people experience loss. This new understanding allowed her to release her son's body and bury him with dignity, finally finding a sense of peace in the face of life's inevitable changes. Her story illuminates one of the most challenging yet liberating truths of existence. Nothing lasts forever, and our attempts to deny this reality only increase our suffering. The Buddha didn't console her with false promises of a cure. Instead, he gave her an experience that allowed her to discover this truth for herself, a much more powerful teaching. The universal nature of loss connects us all in what Buddhists call the fellowship of suffering. When we truly understand that loss touches everyone, our own grief, while still painful, becomes less isolating. Our next story speaks to the wisdom of suspending judgment and maintaining equanimity in the face of life's constant changes. This is the story of the farmer and the horse. Once upon a time, in a small, quiet village, there lived a humble farmer. He was known by his neighbors for his hard work and calm demeanor. His farm was modest, and he had only one horse to help with all of his daily tasks, from plowing the fields to carrying heavy loads. Though he didn't have much, the farmer was content with his life. One day, his horse ran away. The farmer woke up to find that his stable was empty, and the horse had vanished. And his neighbors, hearing the news, rushed to his house to express their sympathy. "What terrible luck," they said. "How will you manage without your horse? This must be such a misfortune." The farmer, however, remained calm. He looked at his neighbors and simply replied, "Maybe." The neighbors were puzzled by his response. How could he be so indifferent to such bad luck? They shook their heads and returned to their homes, convinced that the farmer was in denial about his loss. A few days later, to everyone's surprise, the horse returned, but it didn't come back alone. It brought with it a group of wild horses from the mountains. Now the farmer had not just one horse, but several. The neighbors heard the news and rushed back to the farmer's house. This time they were full of excitement. "How wonderful!" they exclaimed. "Now you have so many horses. What incredible fortune!" The farmer again looked at his neighbor, smiled calmly, and said, "Maybe." Once again, the neighbors were confused. Surely this was a stroke of good luck, but the farmer seemed just as indifferent as he was before. A few days later, the farmer's son decided to try taming one of the wild horses. While riding the horse, he was thrown off violently and broke his leg. The injury was severe, and the son would be unable to help with the farm work for a long time. Hearing of the accident, the neighbors returned to the farmer's house once again. This time they were filled with sympathy. "What bad luck," they said. "Your son has broken his leg, and now he cannot help you. This is truly unfortunate." As before, the farmer responded with his usual calmness. "Maybe," he said. A few weeks later, the country was thrown into turmoil. A war broke out, and soldiers came to the village to draft all the young men into the army. Many of the village's sons were taken away to fight in the war, but because the farmer's son had a broken leg, he was not drafted and stayed home with his father. Once again, the neighbors visited the farmer. "How fortunate you are," they said. Because of your son's injury, he was spared from the war. What amazing luck. And once again, the farmer replied, maybe. This story highlights a fundamental truth about our minds. We rush to label events as good or bad, fortunate or unfortunate, and our emotions rise and fall with these judgments. But as the farmer shows, we never have the complete picture. We cannot see how today's misfortune might prevent tomorrow's disaster or how today's blessing might lead to tomorrow's challenge. The farmer's calm, maybe, wasn't passive resignation but active wisdom. He possessed what the Buddha called equanimity, a balanced perspective that remained steady amid life's inevitable ups and downs. He cared about his horse and his son, but he didn't allow his peace of mind to be at the mercy of changing circumstances. The distinctions of good luck and bad luck are our own mental creations. By suspending our quick judgments, we free ourselves from the emotional roller coaster and open to life's inherent wisdom. Our next story reveals the power of non-reactivity and emotional mastery. This is the Buddha and the Angry Man. Once upon a time, while the Buddha was teaching a group of disciples in a peaceful forest, a man approached him with anger burning in his eyes. The man had heard about the Buddha's teachings, but felt threatened by his influence over others. Filled with jealousy and resentment, he decided to confront the Buddha and insult him in front of his followers. As the Buddha sat calmly under the shade of a Bodhi tree, the man stormed up to him and began hurling insults. "You are nothing but a fraud," the man shouted. "Who do you think you are? You may pretend to be wise and enlightened, but you're just deceiving people." The Buddha remained completely calm and unbothered by the man's harsh words. His expression didn't change, and he didn't respond to the man's anger. Seeing the Buddha's lack of reaction only made the man angrier. He shouted even louder, "How can you just sit there acting like you're above everyone else? Do you think you're better than me? I refuse to respect someone like you." Despite the man's fury, the Buddha stayed silent and serene, simply watching him with compassion. Finally, after several minutes of shouting, the man grew exhausted. He had expected to provoke a response, but the Buddha's peaceful demeanor confused him. After catching his breath, the man demanded, "Why won't you say anything? Why won't you defend yourself? Don't you care what I think of you?" The Buddha looked at him with kindness and finally spoke, his voice soft and calm. "Tell me," the Buddha asked gently, "if someone offers you a gift and you decline to accept it, to whom does the gift belong?" The man, puzzled by the question, thought for a moment before responding, "It would still belong to the person who offered it. If I don't take it, the gift remains theirs." The Buddha nodded. "Exactly. And in the same way, if you offer me your anger and I do not accept it, then who does the anger belong to?" The man was stunned by the Buddha's words. He realized that his anger had not affected the Buddha at all. Instead, it remained his own burden to carry. The Buddha continued, "If I refuse to accept your insults and your anger, they fall back on you. You are the one who suffers from them, not me. I choose not to be troubled by your words. Instead, I choose peace." The man stood in silence, contemplating what the Buddha had said. He realized that holding on to his anger only harmed himself. Feeling ashamed, the man bowed his head. "Master, I see now that my anger has only caused me pain. How can I learn to be at peace as you are?" The Buddha smiled warmly. "Anger is like a hot coal you pick up with the intention of throwing it at someone. But in the process, you burn yourself. Let go of the coal. Let go of your anger. Instead, practice mindfulness, compassion, and understanding. Through these, you will find peace." This profound insight illuminates why reactive emotions cause us such suffering. Every moment spent in anger is a moment lost to peace. The metaphor of the gift suggests that emotions like anger and criticism require our acceptance to affect us. When someone directs negativity toward us, we have a choice. We can absorb it and allow it to disturb our peace, or we can decline the offering, maintaining our equanimity. True power is not the reactive force of aggression, but the stable, immovable strength of a quiet heart. Now let us explore a story about the wisdom of impermanence and non-attachment. This is the story of the monk and the teacup. In a quiet Zen monastery nestled in the mountains, a revered monk lived a life of deep contemplation and mindfulness. His students admired him for his wisdom, calm demeanor, and the way he embraced the present moment. One afternoon, during their usual tea ceremony, the monk held up a simple clay teacup and gazed at it for a long moment. The cup was beautiful in its simplicity, with a soft, earthy color and a perfectly rounded shape. The students, curious about their master's silent contemplation, waited eagerly to hear what he had to say. After a few moments, the monk smiled and said, "This teacup is already broken." The students looked at one another in confusion. They could see clearly that the teacup was whole, undamaged, and perfectly intact. One of the younger students couldn't contain his curiosity any longer and spoke up. "Master," he said, "the teacup is not broken, it is perfectly fine. Why do you say it is already broken?" The monk, still smiling, placed the teacup gently on the table in front of him. "In my mind," he said softly, "this teacup is already broken. It may seem whole now, but one day, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps years from now, it will break. This is inevitable. When I understand that it is already broken, I can fully appreciate it as it is without clinging to it. I can enjoy drinking tea from it, knowing that its life is temporary." The students were silent, absorbing the weight of the monk's words. They realized that the master wasn't speaking only about the teacup. He was offering them a deeper lesson about life itself. "Everything in life is like this teacup," the monk continued. "All things, no matter how beautiful or precious, are impermanent. We cannot hold on to them forever." One of the older students asked, "Master, does this mean we should not love or care for things because they will one day be gone?" The monk shook his head gently. "No, it means the opposite. When we accept the impermanence of all things, we can love them more deeply because we are not holding on out of fear of loss. We love and appreciate them for what they are in this moment. We understand that they are part of the natural flow of life. In this way, we can live with a peaceful heart, unburdened by the attachment to things that are bound to change." The monk's declaration that the teacup is already broken offers a different way of relating to impermanence. Instead of denying or resisting change, he embraces it preemptively by acknowledging the inevitable end of all things. This isn't pessimism, but a clear-eyed realism that paradoxically enhances his appreciation of the present moment. The Buddha taught, "All conditioned things are impermanent. When one sees this with insight, one becomes disenchanted with suffering." This wisdom invites us to consider the teacups in our own lives that we cling to with anxiety about their eventual breaking. It could be a cherished old car, a beloved piece of furniture, or even a phase of life. We can practice saying to ourselves, "This too will pass." This is not a dreary reminder, but an invitation to cherish the present moment. The monk doesn't love his teacup less because he knows it will break. He loves it more precisely because its existence is fleeting and precious. Let us now turn to a story that teaches us about the power of non-reactivity and the freedom that comes from letting go. This is the story of the two monks and the river. Two Buddhist monks, Tanzan and Aikido, were once traveling together down a muddy road in the countryside during the rainy season. Heavy rains had fallen, leaving the road flooded in many places and making their journey difficult. As they rounded a bend, they came upon a lovely young woman in a silk kimono and sash, unable to cross a large muddy puddle that blocked the path. She stood hesitating at the edge, clearly distressed about how to proceed without ruining her beautiful clothes. Without a word, Tanzan went to the woman, picked her up in his arms, carried her across the muddy water, and set her down safely on the other side. The woman thanked him with a bow and continued on her way. The two monks resumed their journey in silence. As they walked, the younger monk Aikido appeared troubled. His brow was furrowed, and he kept glancing at his companion with a mixture of confusion and disapproval. Finally, after several hours of walking, the younger monk could no longer contain himself. "Brother Tanzan," he burst out, "we monks are not supposed to go near females, especially young and lovely ones. It is dangerous. Why did you do that?" Tanzan replied calmly, "I left the girl there by the river." "Are you still carrying her?" Aikido was stunned into silence, suddenly aware of the burden he had been carrying for hours, not a physical woman, but the weight of judgment, concern, and mental agitation. While Tanzan had responded to a momentary need with compassion and then returned fully to the present journey, Aikido had been dwelling on the incident long after it was over. This story highlights a fundamental truth about our minds. We often carry unnecessary mental burdens long after the event has passed. This mental habit, known as rumination, consumes energy that could be directed toward the present moment and often reinforces negative emotions like anger, guilt, or anxiety. Aikido was so focused on the letter of the monastic rule that he missed its spirit, which is to cultivate a mind of purity and compassion. By contrast, Tanzan understood that true purity lies in the absence of selfish desire, not in rigid rule following. In our daily lives, we all carry similar invisible burdens. The argument from last week that we keep replaying in our minds, the mistake at work, we can't stop replaying the worries about future scenarios that may never materialize. Each of these mental patterns is like carrying a person across a river and never putting them down. The Buddha taught, let go of the past, let go of the future, let go of the present, and cross over to the farther shore of existence. The wisdom here is simple: learn to put down what no longer needs to be carried. The practice of mindfulness helps us notice when we are carrying unnecessary thoughts and gently set them down. This letting go isn't about forgetting or denying our experiences, but about preventing them from becoming obstacles to living fully in the present. Let us now turn to a story that teaches us about the obstacles we create in our own minds. And this is the story of the empty cup. A respected university professor once visited a Zen master seeking to understand Zen wisdom. The professor had spent many years studying philosophy and religious texts and had written several books on comparative spirituality. He considered himself quite knowledgeable, but was curious about Zen's unique perspective. When he arrived at the master's simple dwelling, the old Zen master greeted him warmly and invited him to sit. "I have come to inquire about Zen," the professor began. "I would like to know what teachings you have to offer and how they differ from the many philosophies I have already studied." The master smiled and said, "Let us have tea first. Then we can talk about Zen. The professor nodded, expecting that after the customary tea, he would have the serious philosophical discussion he had traveled so far to engage in. The Zen master prepared the tea with deliberate, mindful movements. When it was ready, he placed a cup in front of the professor and began to pour. The cup filled to the brim, but the master continued pouring. Tea spilled over the rim, across the table, and onto the professor's clothes and the floor. The professor jumped up in alarm. "Stop! The cup is full. No more will go in." The Zen master stopped pouring and looked directly at the professor. "Like this cup," he said, "you are full of your own opinions, theories, and assumptions. How can I show you Zen unless you first empty your cup?" The professor was stunned into silence. In that moment, he realized that his extensive knowledge had become a barrier rather than a pathway to new understanding. His cup was so full that there was no room for anything new to enter. With this humbling insight, he bowed to the master, ready now to truly begin learning. This story points to the importance of maintaining an open, receptive mind, what Zen calls beginner's mind. When we approach life with the fresh perspective of a beginner, we remain open to infinite possibilities. When we believe we already know, we close ourselves to new insights. Our ego loves certainty and control, and by convincing ourselves that we understand how things are, we create an illusion of security in an inherently uncertain world. This fear keeps us clinging to our filled cups, even when they no longer serve us. The consequences of a full cup extend beyond limiting our learning. When our minds are crammed with preconceptions, we experience life through filters that distort our perception. We see not what is actually before us, but what our existing knowledge tells us should be there. We miss the richness and complexity of reality by forcing it to conform to our limited understanding. Zen practice offers specific methods for emptying our cups. Meditation trains us to observe how quickly we label, categorize, and judge experiences based on past knowledge. By noticing these mental habits, we create space between our pure awareness and our conceptual overlays. We practice putting aside what we think we know to encounter reality directly. The Buddha said, "With our thoughts, we make the world." When our thoughts are rigid and fixed, the world becomes small and predictable. When we empty our cups, approaching life with openness and humility, the world reveals its boundless wonder. Now let us explore a story about the wisdom of true mastery. This is the story of the master archer. In ancient China, there lived a master archer known throughout the land for his extraordinary skill. His arrows never missed their mark, and his reputation had spread far and wide. The emperor himself had recognized the archer's talents, bestowing upon him honors and riches. One day, a young archer approached the master. Having heard of the elder's legendary abilities, the young man was eager to learn his secrets. "Master," said the young archer, "I have practiced archery for many years and have achieved some skill, but I wish to reach the highest levels of mastery as you have. Please share with me the technique that makes your arrows never miss." The master archer looked at the young man thoughtfully. "Meet me at dawn tomorrow on the mountain," he said. "Bring your bow and arrows." The next morning, the eager student arrived at the appointed place where the master was waiting. Instead of a practice range with targets, they stood at the edge of a cliff with a deep chasm below. The master led the young archer to the very edge of the precipice, where the ground fell away sharply hundreds of feet to the valley below. Standing at this precarious spot, the master took his position, drew his bow, and shot an arrow into the distance. Then he turned to the student and said, "Now you stand here and shoot." The young archer cautiously approached the edge. Looking down at the dizzying drop, he felt his heart race and his knees weaken. His hands began to tremble as he tried to nock an arrow. After several attempts, he stepped back from the edge. "I cannot shoot from here, master," he admitted. "The height makes me dizzy and fear makes my hands unsteady. How can I hit a target when I am afraid of falling?" The master nodded and spoke gently. "This is the secret you seek. The difference between us is not in technique or strength. It is that when I shoot, there is only the arrow, the bow, and the target. There is no fear, no thought of success or failure, no awareness of being watched or praised. There is not even a self who is shooting. There is only the perfect unity of archer and target." He continued, "You miss your mark not because your skill is lacking, but because you are divided. Part of you shoots the arrow while another part fears falling, hopes for success, worries about failure, and remains self-conscious. When you can shoot with your whole being, undivided by fear or desire, you will find the mastery you seek." The young archer bowed deeply, understanding that he had received a lesson far more valuable than any technique. He had been shown the true path to mastery, not just in archery, but in all of life. True mastery in any field comes not from technique alone, but from total presence and the dissolution of the separate self that creates division within us. This state of complete absorption is called mushin, or no mind. Athletes call it being in the zone. Artists know it as being carried by the work, and musicians experience it as becoming one with the music. The master archer's lesson applies to everything we do. Whether you're having a conversation, working on a project, caring for a child, or preparing a meal, can you bring your whole being to the activity? Can you notice when you're divided with part of you? Present while another part worries, plans, or judges. The satisfaction we seek is not in achieving results, but in the quality of presence we bring to each moment. Let us now explore a story about finding solutions by approaching problems differently. This is the story of the Zen master and the heavy stone. In a small village nestled among mountains, the main road was partially blocked by an enormous stone that had fallen from the cliffs above. The stone was so large and heavy that none of the villagers could move it despite their best efforts. Several strong men had tried pushing it together, but it wouldn't budge. Others had attempted to break it into smaller pieces, but the stone was unusually hard, and their tools merely scratched its surface. Some had tried digging around it to roll it away, but the ground was too firm and the stone too deeply embedded. After many failed attempts, the villagers decided to seek help from a Zen master who lived in a monastery nearby. The master was known for his wisdom and creative solutions to difficult problems. When the villagers explained their predicament, the Zen master agreed to come see the stone. A crowd gathered as the elderly master slowly made his way to the obstacle. Everyone expected him to offer some profound technique or organize a better method for moving the heavy boulder. Upon reaching the stone, the master circled it slowly, examining it from all angles with great attention. The villagers waited anxiously for his solution. Finally, the master stopped, looked at the gathered crowd, and asked why must the stone be moved. The villagers were confused by the question. Because it blocks the road, one replied. It makes travel difficult and slows our carts and wagons. The master nodded thoughtfully and said, "The stone blocks one path, but perhaps it creates another." He then guided the villagers in clearing and forming a new path around the stone. With many hands working together, they soon created a smooth alternate route that curved gently around the boulder. Not only did this new path solve their problem, but the massive stone became a landmark, a natural monument that gave their village a unique identity. Children played on it, elders rested in its shade, and over time the villagers came to appreciate the very obstacle they had once resented. Before leaving, the Zen master said to them, "Some obstacles cannot be removed. The wisdom lies in finding a way to live with them or around them. What appears to block your path might actually be showing you a new direction." This story teaches us about rigid thinking, our inability to adapt our approach when faced with resistance. The villagers were so fixated on removing the stone that they couldn't see any alternative approach. When our initial efforts don't succeed, we often just try harder using the same method rather than stepping back to reconsider our entire approach. The master's simple question reframed the situation entirely. He helped the villagers see that the problem wasn't the stone itself, but their attachment to the idea of the original path. By letting go of their expectations, they were able to discover a creative solution that was hidden in plain sight. In your own life, consider a challenge you've been struggling with. Have you been pushing against your heavy stone, attempting the same solution repeatedly with minimal success? What might happen if, like the Zen master, you stepped back and questioned your fundamental assumptions about the problem? Let us now explore a lesser-known Zen story that reveals profound wisdom about controlling our thoughts. This is the cricket in the temple. In a bustling Japanese city, a magnificent temple stood for centuries, its golden roof gleaming in the sun. Despite being surrounded by the noise of modern life traffic, construction crowds of tourists within its walls, a sense of profound peace prevailed. One day, a young musician visited the temple. Having studied both music and a meditation, he was curious about the quality of silence that seemed to permeate the sacred space. As he sat quietly in a corner of the main hall, he closed his eyes and focused on his hearing, trying to understand what made this silence so special. To his surprise, beneath the occasional footsteps of visitors and the distant city noise, he detected a subtle, rhythmic sound, so faint it was almost imperceptible. Curious, he followed the sound to its source and discovered a tiny cricket living in a small crack in one of the ancient wooden pillars. The musician was amazed. How could such a tiny creature be heard in this vast space? He approached an elderly monk who was sweeping the temple floor and asked, "Venerable one, have you noticed there's a cricket living in that pillar?" The old monk smiled. "Ah, you've heard our little friend. He has lived in the temple for many years. But how is it possible that such a tiny sound can be heard in this large temple with all the noise from the city outside?" the musician asked. The monk put down his broom and gestured for the young man to follow him. He led the musician to the entrance of the temple and reached into his robe, pulling out a single coin. "Watch," he said. He dropped the coin onto the stone floor. At the sound of the coin falling, nearly every visitor in the crowded temple turned their heads to look. The monk turned to the puzzled musician. "People hear what they are listening for," he said gently. "The coin is no louder than the cricket, but everyone notices it because money speaks. A language all are trained to hear. The cricket sings day and night, but few notice because they are not listening for such voices." He continued, "Those who quiet their inner noise can hear what others miss, not just crickets, but the whispers of wisdom that speak constantly beneath the clamor of everyday life. True silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of attention." This story points to our habitual mental patterns. We're conditioned to value certain inputs over others. Just as everyone noticed the falling coin, but the few heard the cricket, we are trained to pay attention to dramatic events, loud voices, and urgent demands, while overlooking subtle experiences that might contain deeper truth. Our minds, often called the monkey mind, in Zen, are restless, jumping constantly from thought to thought, rarely settling long enough to perceive what lies beneath the surface. True silence is not about suppressing thoughts, but about developing the capacity to hear what exists beneath and between them. The wisdom we seek has been speaking to us all along. We simply haven't been still enough to hear it. Let us now explore a story about the power of presence. This is the Zen Master and the Strawberries. A Zen student came to his master with a troubled heart. "Master," he said, "I have been studying Zen for 3 years now, but my mind is still restless. When I sit in meditation, thoughts flood in. When I try to be mindful during the day, I find myself constantly distracted by worries about the future and regrets about the past. How can I find peace?" The master listened attentively, then said, "Come with me. I wish to show you something." He led the student out of the monastery and down a narrow mountain path. They walked in silence for nearly an hour until they came to a high cliff overlooking a breathtaking valley. Far below, a river wound its way through forests and meadows glittering in the afternoon sun. The master gestured for the student to sit near the edge of the cliff. When they were both seated comfortably, the master reached into his robe and pulled out 2 perfectly ripe strawberries, placing one before each of them. "Eat," said the master, picking up his strawberry. The student, though confused by this seemingly trivial instruction in the face of his profound spiritual question, obeyed. He picked up the strawberry and bit into it. The flavor was extraordinary, sweet tart, and intensely fragrant. He had eaten strawberries many times before, but somehow this one tasted different. As they ate in silence, the master observed the student's expression of surprised delight. When they had finished, the master spoke. "Tell me," he said, "while you were eating the strawberry, where was your mind?" The student reflected for a moment. "It was here," he realized. "I was completely absorbed in the taste of the strawberry." And during those moments, the master continued, "Were you troubled by thoughts of the past or future? Were you distracted by worries or regrets?" "No," the student said, understanding beginning to dawn. There was only the strawberry. The master smiled. "This is the peace you seek. It is not found by eliminating thoughts or achieving some special state. It is found in complete presence with whatever is right in front of you, whether it's a strawberry, a breath, a task, or even a difficult emotion. When you are fully present, past and future cannot touch you. They exist only in thought, and when thought dissolves into pure experience, peace naturally emerges." The student protested, "But the strawberry was easy to be present with because it was pleasant. What about when I face something difficult or painful?" "An excellent question," nodded the master. "The practice is the same, though, indeed more challenging, whether facing a strawberry or a snake joy or sorrow, praise, or blame. Presence is always available. The nature of what you face changes, but the quality of awareness you bring to it need not change. This is the great freedom of Zen practice." From that day forward, the student approached his practice differently. Rather than struggling to eliminate thoughts or achieve a peaceful state, he focused on bringing complete presence to each moment, each activity, each breath, each task. He found to his surprise that the peace he had been seeking had been available all along in the most ordinary experiences of his life. This story points to the direct path to peace, not through escaping our current experience, but through fully inhabiting it. The strawberry represents any ordinary moment that, when met with complete presence, reveals itself as extraordinary. Let us now turn to a story about clearing away the obstacles to our true nature. This is polishing the mirror. A young monk approached his Zen master after years of dedicated practice. Despite his sincere efforts in meditation and study, he felt that enlightenment remained elusive. "Master," he asked with frustration evident in his voice, "I have been practicing diligently for 7 years now. I follow all the precepts. I meditate faithfully every day. I study the sutras with dedication. Yet I feel no closer to enlightenment than when I began. What am I doing wrong?" The old master looked at the monk with compassion. Instead of answering directly, he led the young man to a storage room at the back of the monastery. There, covered in dust and hidden behind piles of scrolls and ceremonial implements, sat an ancient mirror. Once beautiful and reflective, its surface was now completely obscured by years of dust, grime, and oxidation. "Do you see this mirror?" the master asked. "Yes," replied the monk, somewhat confused by the apparently irrelevant question. "Was this mirror created by the dust that covers it?" The monk frowned. "No, of course not. The mirror exists independent of the dust. The dust merely covers what is already there." "And if someone wished to see their reflection in this mirror, what would they need to do?" The master continued. "They would need to clean it, to remove the dust and polish the surface." The monk answered, beginning to sense where the teaching was leading. The master nodded and handed the young monk a soft cloth. "Please clean this mirror." Day after day, the monk worked on cleaning the ancient mirror. The accumulated grime of decades didn't yield easily. He tried different methods: water oil, fine ash, special polishing compounds. Gradually, with patient, persistent effort, the mirror's surface began to emerge. After many weeks of dedicated work, the mirror was completely restored, its surface now gleaming and perfectly reflective. When the work was complete, the master came to inspect it. Looking at the brilliantly polished mirror, he asked, "Did your efforts create the mirror's reflective nature?" "No," the monk replied. "The mirror always possessed the ability to reflect. My cleaning simply removed what was obscuring this inherent quality. So it is with your Buddha nature," the master explained gently. "Enlightenment is not something you achieve or create through your practice. Your true nature, clear, luminous, and perfectly reflective of reality, has been present from the beginning. Your practice is not about adding something that's missing, but removing the obscurations that hide what has always been there." The master continued, "The dust represents your attachments, aversions, and delusions, all the mental patterns that cloud your inherent clarity. Meditation precepts and study are like the cloth you use to polish the mirror. They don't create enlightenment. They reveal what has always been your original face." With this understanding, the young monk's approach to practice transformed completely. Rather than striving to attain some idealized state, he now understood his work as a process of recognition and removal, recognizing the dust of conditioning as it appeared and gently cleaning it away, to allow his inherent Buddha nature to shine forth naturally. This story teaches us that what we are today comes from our thoughts of yesterday, and our present thoughts build our life of tomorrow. Our mind is everything. The dust is not permanent. It can be cleaned away through aware attention to our present thoughts and actions. Let us now explore a story about simplicity and the direct path to understanding. This is Pointing at the Moon. One evening, a Zen master was walking with his disciple under a brilliant full moon. The night was clear, and the moonlight illuminated the garden path, creating patterns of silver light and deep shadow. As they walked in companionable silence, the master noticed the disciple was troubled, his brow furrowed in concentration. "What troubles you?" asked the master. "Master," replied the disciple, "I have been studying the sutras diligently, but the more I read, the more confused I become. One text seems to contradict another. Some emphasize rigorous practice, others sudden enlightenment. Some focus on compassion, others on wisdom. I can't unify all these teachings into a coherent understanding." The master listened attentively, then suddenly stopped walking and pointed to the full moon hanging in the night sky. "Look," he said simply. The disciple looked up at the moon, its perfect circle glowing against the darkness. "Tell me," said the master, "are you looking at my finger or at the moon?" "At the moon, of course," replied the disciple, somewhat confused by the question. "And did you need to analyze or study my finger in order to see the moon?" "No," said the disciple. "Your finger merely pointed the way." The master nodded. "The sutras, the teachings, the methods, these are all fingers pointing at the moon. They are not the moon itself. They direct us toward direct experience of reality, but they are not that reality. If you focus too much on the finger, analyzing it, comparing it to other fingers, debating its merits, you may entirely miss what it's pointing toward." The master continued walking, and after a few steps added, "The teachings may seem contradictory because they are addressing different people with different needs, or describing different aspects of the same reality, like many fingers pointing at the same moon from different angles. But the moon itself is not divided or contradictory. When you look directly at it, there is only moonlight, perfectly unified and complete." The disciple fell silent, contemplating this teaching. As they continued their walk, he found himself less preoccupied with intellectual understanding and more present with the direct experience of moonlight, the sound of crickets, and the feeling of the evening breeze. For the first time, he understood that the path to wisdom lay not in accumulating concepts, but in opening to the direct experience that the concepts were merely pointing toward. This story warns against the human tendency to become attached to spiritual teachings rather than allowing them to guide us toward direct experience of reality. We so readily confuse the finger for the moon because of our deeply ingrained habit of conceptual thinking, where we mistake our mental maps for the territory they represent. The Buddha taught, "My teaching is like a finger pointing to the moon. Do not mistake the finger for the moon." Zen practice helps us move beyond this conceptual overlay. The tradition's emphasis on direct transmission beyond words points us toward understanding that cannot be contained in intellectual knowledge alone. It's a call to let go of what we think we know and simply be present with what is. Let us now turn to a story about finding our true path. This is choosing the right boat. A young seeker once traveled to a riverside monastery known for its wise Zen masters. Having studied multiple spiritual traditions and practices, he found himself confused about which path to follow. Each teaching seemed to contradict the others, and the variety of methods left him paralyzed with indecision. When he arrived at the monastery, he was greeted by an elderly master who listened patiently to his dilemma. "Master," the young man said, "I have studied yoga, practiced various forms of meditation, read the sutras, explored rituals and ceremonies, and even delved into esoteric practices. Each tradition claims to be the true path to enlightenment, yet they point in different directions. How can I know which is the right path for me? How can I be sure I'm not wasting my time or following a false teaching? The master smiled and led the young man down to the riverbank. Several boats were moored there, fishing boats, transport vessels, small rowboats, and elegant crafts with sails. "Tell me," said the master, gesturing to the boats, "which of these is the right boat?" The seeker looked confused. "The right boat for what, master? Nikar, exactly." The master nodded. "Without knowing your destination, how can you choose the proper vessel? Some boats are designed for fishing, others for carrying cargo, others for speed, others for navigating shallow waters. None is inherently right or wrong. Each has its purpose." The master continued, "So it is with spiritual practices. The question is not which path is universally right, but which serves your particular journey. Where are you trying to go? What obstacles do you face? What is your temperament? The answers to these questions will guide your choice of vessel." But the seeker objected, "Surely some spiritual paths must be superior to others. Some must lead to a greater truth." "Let me ask you this," replied the master. "Is a fishing boat superior to a passenger ferry, or is a sailboat better than a rowboat? Each serves its purpose according to conditions and needs." The master picked up a small stone and tossed it into the river. "All these boats share one essential purpose: to cross the water without sinking. Similarly, all genuine spiritual paths, despite their differences in method and emphasis, share a common aim: to free us from suffering and illusion, to awaken us to our true nature." "How then do I choose?" asked the young man. "By knowing yourself." The master answered, "Observe which teachings resonate deeply with you, which practices bear fruit in your life, which traditions feel like coming home. Trust your direct experience over abstract arguments, and remember that the boat is not the destination, it is a vehicle to carry you across. Once you reach the other shore, you won't need to carry the boat on your back." The seeker was silent for a time, taking in these words. Finally, he bowed to the master, understanding that his quest was not for the universally right path, but for the path that would serve his particular journey across the waters of life. The Buddha taught, "I teach one thing, and one thing, only suffering and the end of suffering." This points to the pragmatic heart of all spiritual practice. Like the boats in the story, different practices may take varying approaches, but their ultimate purpose converges on this essential aim. Our confusion about paths often comes from our desire for absolute certainty and our attachment to the form of the teaching rather than its function. The most important quality of any spiritual approach is its capacity to awaken us to the present moment, the only place where genuine transformation can occur. Let us now turn to a story about the nature of true understanding. This is the sound of one hand. Hakuin was a renowned Zen master who lived in Japan during the Edo period. He was known for his rigorous teaching style and for revitalizing Zen practice through his emphasis on direct experience rather than intellectual understanding. Among the many paradoxical questions or statements used in Zen training that Hakuin employed, his most famous was remarkably simple. "What is the sound of one hand?" One day, an earnest young monk came to study with Hakuin. After a period of preliminary training, Hakuin assigned him this koan. "You must discover the sound of one hand," the master instructed. "Until you do, you will understand nothing of Zen." The monk bowed and retreated to meditate on this perplexing question. After a few days, he returned to Hakuin's quarters for a private interview. "Master," he said, "I believe I have the answer. The sound of one hand is the sound of water flowing in a stream." Hakuin shook his head. "No, keep working." The monk returned to his meditation. A week later, he came back. "Master, I have it now. The sound of one hand is the sound of wind moving through pine needles." Noise Hakuin replied, "That is still the sound of something. Go deeper." Again and again, the monk returned with various answers: the cry of a bird, the rustle of leaves, the distant temple bell. Each time, Hakuin rejected his response and sent him back to continue his inquiry. After months of intensive practice, the monk's understanding began to shift. He stopped trying to find a clever answer and instead allowed the question to penetrate deeper beyond his conceptual mind. One morning, as he sat in meditation, something broke open within him. He rushed to Hakuin's quarters. When Hakuin asked, "What is the sound of one hand?" the monk responded not with words, but with presence, a direct, immediate demonstration that transcended conceptual understanding. Hakuin smiled and nodded, recognizing that the monk had finally moved beyond seeking answers to experiencing the question itself as a gateway to direct realization. This story highlights the distinction between conceptual understanding, which points toward truth, and direct realization, which is truth itself. The monk's journey from intellectual answers to immediate experience reflects this fundamental shift. We so persistently mistake concepts for reality because of our educational conditioning, which trains us to believe that understanding comes primarily through thinking and verbal formulation. This creates a bias toward intellectual comprehension at the expense of other ways of knowing. Koans, like the sound of one hand, are not philosophical puzzles to be solved, but devices for exhausting the conceptual mind and opening a doorway to direct experience. They deliberately challenge logical thinking, creating conditions where intellectual understanding must give way to a different mode of knowing. True knowing is not about having the right concept, but about becoming the understanding itself through direct experience. Let us now turn to our final story, one that illuminates the way beyond seeking. This is the Sacred Mountain. In ancient China, a young scholar named Li had devoted years to studying spiritual texts from various traditions. He had read countless sutras, memorized sacred verses, and debated with learned masters. Despite his extensive knowledge, he felt that something essential was missing. A direct experience of the truth these teachings pointed toward. Having heard that a great Zen master lived as a hermit on a sacred mountain, Li decided to make the difficult journey to seek the master's guidance. After many days of arduous travel through forests and up steep slopes, he finally reached the simple hut where the master lived. The old master welcomed him warmly and invited him to rest from his journey. After they had shared a simple meal, Li explained the purpose of his visit. "Master," he said, "I have studied the spiritual teachings extensively. I know the doctrines and philosophies, but I feel I am missing the essence. What is the ultimate truth? What is the final goal of all spiritual seeking? What is enlightenment?" The master looked at him with kind eyes and said, "Before I answer, would you like some tea?" Li nodded, and the master rose to prepare it. While the water was heating, the master asked, "Tell me, what did you notice as you climbed the mountain to reach my hut?" Li thought for a moment. "Well, the path was steep and difficult. There were many rocks and roots that made climbing challenging. Sometimes I had to rest to catch my breath." "And did you notice anything else?" the master inquired. There were beautiful pine trees and colorful wildflowers along the way, Li added. At one point, I crossed a stream with incredibly clear water, and occasionally there were gaps in the trees that revealed breathtaking views of the valleys below. I see, said the master, pouring the tea. And now that you are here, what do you expect to find? Li hesitated. I'm not sure exactly. Some profound teaching or experience that will finally make everything clear. The ultimate truth that all the texts point toward but never quite reveal. The master handed Li a cup of tea and sat down beside him at the entrance to the hut. From this vantage point, they could see the magnificent landscape. After they had sipped their tea, in silence for some time, the master spoke. The ultimate truth you seek was present in every step of your journey, in the effort of your climbing, in the beauty you observed, in the challenges you faced. It is here now, in this cup of tea, in the mountains before us, in the space of awareness in which all these experiences arise. He continued, there is nothing to attain beyond what is already present. Enlightenment is not some special state separate from your ordinary experience. It is seeing the extraordinary within the ordinary, recognizing the sacred nature of each moment. The master gestured toward the panorama before them. This mountain you call sacred is no more sacred than the ground where your home stands. These trees are no more special than those growing in your village. This moment is no different in its essential nature from every other moment of your life. Li looked confused. Then why did I need to make this difficult journey? Why do we study and practice at all? The master smiled. The journey was necessary not because the truth is hidden on this mountain, but because you believed it was. Sometimes we must exhaust our seeking before we can recognize what has never been absent. The spiritual path is not about finding what is missing, but about seeing what is already here. As they continued to sit in the quiet beauty of the mountain evening, Li began to understand. The truth he had been seeking was not hidden in esoteric teachings or special experiences, but in the direct, unfiltered encounter with life itself, just as it is in all its ordinary marvel. The Buddha taught, if we could see the miracle of a single flower, clearly our whole life would change. This teaching points to the radical shift in perception that occurs when we stop overlooking the ordinary and recognize the profound nature of what is already present. As we conclude our journey through these stories, may the truths illuminated in them remain with you not as concepts to remember, but as invitations to experience life with greater presence, compassion, and wisdom. Thank you for sharing this journey with Calm Buddha. May you rest peacefully, waking refreshed, and carrying these ancient teachings into the light of a new day.